They just know how to pull me back in. They know what they're doing. They're dangling the carrot on the stick. They know how to do it. Oh, so if you're unaware, they recently released for the upcoming set new Monarch support. As you all know, I love Monarchs. I played Monarchs back in the day when, you know, Zaborg and Mobius were actually cracked, and then they gave us the God Monarch support in 2015 with the structure deck, and that was one of the craziest decks, you know, for its time. And now here we are, 10 years later, we have new Monarch support, and this stuff is fucking crazy. Now, full context, obviously I've been out of the game for a while, so I'm not going to pick up on every single little intricacy with all of these cards. So for anyone who knows, put down in the comments anything that I'm not going to cover here, because especially since I've been out of the game for so long. However, holy shit, these cards are fucking crazy. These are like Reddit custom cards for Monarchs, okay? So if this is your first time seeing these cards, get excited because these cards are insane. And we're going to kind of go through all the little intricacies and things that these cards enable. So first up, we have Idos, the Underworld Monarch. It's really cool to see that we had little baby Idos before, and now we have grown-up Idos, right? He's got the Monarch stat line. He is a level 6 Dark Spellcaster effect, 2400 attack, 1000 defense, and you can only use the first, second, and third effect of this card's name once per turn each. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can add one Monarch spell or trap, or one monster with 2800 attack and 1000 defense from your deck or graveyard to your hand. So what does that mean? Well, we're able to add any Monarch spell or trap or any of the Mega Monarchs, if you will. So this actually means that Pantheism is now searchable. Pantheism was only, I think, searchable through, like, Tenacity previously, and so this means you have another way to get to Pantheism, which is arguably one of the best cards in your entire deck. But it can also search for, you know, if you want to go through Tenacity to just fuel the graveyard, you can do that. It gets Stormforth, which is arguably one of the best board breakers that the deck just plays in archetype at any given moment, so that's pretty good. And we don't know what the decks are going to look like post the support, but even being able to search like Return or something, right? Or just like any other of your good spells or traps. And also notably, you can search Aether with this. Now, before you could search Aether with like Return, but I don't really think there's many other ways to do that. So the fact that you now have an additional Aether searcher is huge because Aether is how you're interrupting the opponent during their turn, right? And so as a result, being able to have further access to Aether means you're going to have a lot more play with this deck for sure. And you have to remember like how powerful this deck was for its time. We're in 2025, so like obviously we're gonna have to figure out a lot in terms of like if we want to see this deck be competitively viable. I imagine it's still gonna want to go the extra deck route just to lock people out of playing with the extra deck. However, you still have to go second, right? So that's something that this deck has always, you know, had an issue with. But obviously some of the other variants, like, you know, with Brilliant Fusion and such, sort of fixed that issue because the deck was just so resilient that you didn't even need to play the Domain variant. So we'll see, but for the most part, this card is already just, like, fantastic with its first effect alone. We haven't even gotten into the other effects. The second effect is you can declare one attribute. One face-up monster on the field becomes that attribute. That's notable for the Mega Monarchs. I think the Mega Monarchs have conditions on them that, like, if you tribute a monster, like, with, like, a specific attribute, then it's going to, like, get some additional bonus effect, right? Like, Mobius the Mega Monarch pops 3 spells and traps, so, like, different things like that. So I'm pretty sure that's why this is here. I think this is, like, the seldom used effect of this card because it's probably not really going to matter for the most part. There might be some rare instance where it's relevant to you. I guess it could maybe matter if you're not playing the Domain variant. You could make something a certain attribute for, like, an Xyz play or something if you need, like, a light or a dark. I'm thinking back to like when the decks played like Pleiades and such, but obviously that was like so long ago. But there could be some weird applications for it. You're probably never going to use this spec for the most part. And then third, if you tribute summon a monster with 2400 or more attack and 1000 defense while this card is in your graveyard, you can either add this card to your hand or special summon it. So the third effect fuels the first effect, which is nice. And granted, it's just in your graveyard. And so you might be wondering, okay, we have to get this card to the graveyard. How are we doing that? Well, this deck historically did play Foolish Burial because like Foolish Burial wasn't like the worst thing you could play. It wasn't like phenomenal, but it was fine. But it was like an okay way to sort of get your play set up. My editor actually pointed this out. It is a level 6 spellcaster. You can just play Magician Souls in this deck now because you're sending a level 6 or higher spellcaster from your deck to the graveyard, which is fucking crazy, by the way, because this deck already plays such a high density of spell and trap cards that you will gladly throw a couple of them away to draw cards. Not to mention, if you're pitching something like Pantheism, you're going to plus off of it anyway. If you're pitching Prime, now Prime is already immediately set up in the graveyard. Like, this is nuts. This is such a crazy interaction because your turn one can just be like Souls send Idos, right? You get Souls out, and now you can dump some stuff, redraw some cards. That gives you additional setup. Idos is already in the grave, so even if you just tribute summon Souls, which you're probably not, that's like the bare minimum play, right? Now Idos comes back to the field, that triggers the first effect, and now you can search either a Mega Monarch to keep playing from there, or you can search whatever spell and trap you're missing for any particular play. The fact that this deck now has Souls access is nuts. Not to mention, 1-for-1 is even better in this deck because Edia is already a level 1, so you're already playing this anyway, right? So, like, 1-for-1 is already good. The fact you have another target in Souls, if you, like, run out of Edia, if you're not playing it, or if you just run out of copies or whatever, then, like, you still have targets, which means 1-for-1 is going to be live. And one of the biggest Achilles heels of this deck is not being able to special summon to continue your plays, because you need to get guys on the field, and usually the normal summon's, like, the key point that you stop the deck. So getting more special summons to be able to freely get, because the deck has no issue with additional tribute summons, it's that you lacked special summons to actually, like, execute the additional tribute summons. This card is phenomenal. This card is crazy. It enables so much, and this is going to be a guaranteed staple just because Souls exists. You have free setup for this card. So you'll probably play 3 Souls and Foolish Burial moving forward because you don't even care about the -1. The value makes up for after this guy gets out onto the field. This card's phenomenal. This is great. But it doesn't end there. We have plenty more to cover. First of all, the art on these cards is just, like, insane. It's so cool. This is Tessera, the Prime Squire. It looks like Dark Edia, or, like, you know, mystically enchanted Edia. It's pretty cool. It's a level 1 warrior effect. Another 1-for-1 target, by the way. So, like, we have even more targets for this, and we'll get into that. Level 1 light warrior effect. Also, warrior means we can still play Rhoda to search it. 800 attack, 1000 defense. All the Squires typically have that stat line. You can only use each of their effects once per turn. You can reveal 1 Monarch spell or trap in your hand, special summon this card. So again, we're alleviating the issue that the deck is so heavily normal summon reliant, because before, you'd go like Edia, try to get to Idos, and that would get you a setup for a play. And if your opponent stops Edia, you kind of just pass because you can't do anything. But now, if you still have the ability to, like, tribute summon, like, through some other mechanism, because plenty of cards bestow you with extra tribute summons, now you can, like, special summon Idos, you can special summon Tessera, and you're still able to actually play, right? That's huge for this deck, and that was something that it always lacked. So being able to reveal any Monarch spell or trap to special this, that's not hard. This deck plays so many spells and traps that this is basically always going to be online, and it's not difficult to get you a Monarch spell or trap between Idos, between Pantheism, between just everything else the deck has. Tenacity, like, whatever. Like, that's not an issue. Second effect, during your main phase, you can immediately after this effect resolves, tribute summon 1 monster. Again, there's plenty of cards in the deck that allow you to just get an extra tribute summon. Idos, not this one, but the original Idos does it. This does it now. There's additional tribute summons all over the place. Escalation is another one, which saw some play. It wasn't, like, always played, but it was a one of in some decks. So any way to give you additional tribute summons that don't take up your actual tribute summon is huge, because that means that you're not, like, gated by the fact that you have a handful of tributes and you use your 1 tribute, your opponent stopped it, now you're shit out of luck, right? So that's really good. And then third, if this card is sent to the graveyard, by any means, it doesn't have to be tribute, it just has to be sent to the graveyard, you can special summon a monster with 800 attack and 1000 defense from your deck. Also, you cannot special summon from the extra deck for the rest of this turn. So it does extra deck lock you, but I think for the most part, you want to look at this deck in the context of Domain, because although Domain is unhealthy by shutting off the opposing extra deck, it's a very solid game plan for this deck, because if your opponent can't play with their extra deck, it's going to be hard for them to win the game. This is crazy because you can special it for free, and then you use it as a tribute to be able to bring out any of your Monarchs, and then once that goes to grave, you special Edia directly from the deck, and then Edia triggers to get Idos, and you basically have, like, the whole deck basically just from that interaction alone. Not to mention, if it's sent to the graveyard in any means, this just gives more credibility to a card like Foolish Burial, right? Because now you have even more targets that you want to dump off of it, that it doesn't feel like a dead card. You actually have quite the toolbox with it. It's level 1, so you can 1-for-1 it. Just tons of value with this card, right? I mean, this card is fucking incredible for the archetype. And I don't really have much to say. Like, this card is just fucking crazy. So that's it for the monsters, right? We're already like only 2 cards in. And like I said, these are basically Reddit custom cards for this archetype. Like, this is fucking nuts. Then we get to Scheme of the Monarchs. I first of all just love the art of this. Like, look how menacing Zaborg looks with his hands like this and the fucking green afro. It's hilarious. But anyway, this is a normal spell. You can only use the second effect of this card once per turn. So this first one is not a once per turn. You can send a Monarch spell or trap from your deck to the graveyard, except Scheme. This is good because we were already playing Foolish Burial Goods to dump both Pantheism and Prime. You probably dump Pantheism like 9 times out of 10. Now you have Foolish Burial Goods in archetype, which is way better because not only now can you search it with something like Tenacity, you can also like dump it off of an Aether or Erebus activation. So if you need to just get cards in the graveyard to activate these effects, you can use it for those effects where Foolish Burial would still be stuck in your deck. So like if you no longer need extra like specific cards like in your graveyard, right? Like if you already have your Tenacity set up, or not your Tenacity, if you already have your Prime set up or multiple Prime set up, or if you already like went through all your Pantheisms for one reason or another, then you can just dump this off the Mega Monarchs and just thin your deck further. So that way you're actually going to start drawing more live cards. There's a lot of implications for this. And the fact that it's not a hard once means that like if you draw multiples, it's fine. Like you can go Scheme dump Pantheism, get a free like thing off Pantheism, and then Scheme dump Prime, right? And now you're able to just have like setup from that. That's really strong. That's really, really good. The second effect, this one, remember, is a once per turn. If this card becomes banished, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls. Add one monster with 2400 attack and 1000 defense and the same attribute from your deck or graveyard to your hand. Then immediately after this effect resolves, you can normal summon 1. Zaborg the Thunder Monarch, Mobius the Frost Monarch, Thessalos the Firestorm Monarch, Grandmarg the Rock Monarch, Rise of the Storm Monarch, or Caius the Shadow Monarch. So this allows you to search any of the OG Monarchs and then immediately tribute summon them. Is that good? It kind of depends. So like, are you actually going to brick your deck with these guys just to activate this ability? It's kind of hard to say. I think Caius probably has the strongest argument because I'd say a lot of the time people are playing a deck that is dark focus. And even if that's like not the main attribute, a lot of stuff in the extra deck might be dark. So it should be pretty easy for you to target your opponent's face-up monster, add Caius, and then tribute summon for Caius. And then you can use Caius to just be able to banish something that they have. So that's pretty good. Ryza is also really good, but the biggest issue with Ryza is that it's wind. So unless your opponent is playing like a wind deck, then like that's not going to really help you all that much. So I think the problem with this card in the second effect is that it's very like meta specific in terms of like what you can actually do. And do you waste the deck space in playing 1 or 2 of the bad Monarchs in quotes just to get these abilities? Because like Caius and Ryza are the best ones. Thessalos is fine, but again, they have to be playing Fire, which I mean, Fire's seen a ton of play in the Year of Fire, so that's not like too difficult. Mobius, like Mermail at this point in time is a really strong deck, so like you could play Mobius, but do you really care about popping 2 back row? That's kind of like up for debate. I would say no. Zaborg is light, but the problem with Zaborg is it just pops something. Like it's not like a banish like Caius or a spin like Ryza, and it has to go after monsters specifically, so it's a bit more limited in that regard. Notably, you can add any monster with those stats from your deck or grave to hand, so you can add back Erebus, you can add back Idos, excuse me, because Idos does have the 2400 attack, 1000 defense stat line. You just don't get the ability to normal summon him to the field. It's also annoying too because you normal summon it. I just realized you don't even tribute summon it. So the whole purpose of this is what? Just to get another guy on the field for fodder? This is like infinitely worse now that I see it. If anything, it's just, if you're normal summoning it, you normal summon it to the field. It's not a tribute summon. It's just another guy. And how are you banishing this, right? You're banishing this off of like Prime, because Prime needs to banish stuff in order to activate its effect. I guess it gets you set up for a Mega Monarch play, because you can go banish this for Prime, summon Prime, and then you use the effect because you banish Scheme to add Caius, and then like you normal Caius, and now you have 2 guys on the field. You haven't used your normal summon yet, so that can just be 2 tributes for a Mega Monarch potentially just off of that. That's interesting. I guess it's like, in that respect, it's good because it allows you to get guys to the field without committing to your actual normal or tribute for the turn. This one's interesting. I still think you play this regardless just because the first effect is just in archetype Foolish Burial Goods, which is already crazy. The second effect, I think, might be one of those things where people play like a 3-1 ratio, because you want to play 3 of this because it gets you to tenacity, or I keep saying tenacity. It gets you to pantheism, which is huge. Also gets you to prime, which is important as well. So you're going to play 3 of this, I think, no matter what, which also, if you play 3, means you can pantheism and guarantee it. The second effect, I think, it might be a 3-1 sort of like Garnet ratio, where maybe you just play a Caius just because, and then, like, if you need that extra normal summon, then it's there, and then you just have the ability to go for a double tribute. That one's going to require some thinking. I think you can cook with that. I'm not seeing it at this exact moment. Cool card, though. Very cool card. That's going to be run as a 3 of just because it's in archetype Foolish Burial Goods. There's not much else to say. We've only got a couple more. Again, artwork is so cool on these. We have Rebellion of the Monarchs, yet another normal spell. You can only use the first and second effects once per turn. It only has 2 effects. First effect, discard a card. You cannot special summon from the extra deck for the rest of this turn. Also, reveal 3 monsters with 800 or 2400 or more attack and 1000 defense exactly from your deck. Your opponent chooses one for you to add to your hand. Also, send the rest to the graveyard. So what does this mean? Well, all of the Squires and all of the Monarchs and Mega Monarchs meet this requirement. So you are able to search any monster, which is huge, because that means that, especially if you can reveal 3, you can guarantee that your opponent has to give you 1. This is like, you know, sort of like the pantheism issue, but instead of it being for spells and traps, it's for monsters, which is fantastic. And being a spell, tenacity can get to it, so it's like you have 6 copies. This is incredible. So if you need to get to Edia, or if you need to get to Tessera, the new Squire, you could just reveal 3 and guarantee it. If you want to get to Idos, the new Idos for whatever reason, you can do that as well. Ideally, you can also just search out your, your Mega Monarchs as well. So it's another Aether Searcher, which is really important. Or if you need to get to Erebus, that's pretty good as well. It's a monster searcher. Like, granted, you won't always guarantee it, but for the most part, especially since Erebus can, like, recur stuff from the graveyard, you can probably more often than not actually get the card that you want. And the fact that the rest go to the graveyard is actually pretty important, because in the instance of, let's say, you know, we're going for, Idos, the Underworld Monarch, is one of our cards, that just immediately dumps it into the graveyard. Now, for the most part, I don't think you really want to dump him. Like, I don't think you want to go for him off of this effect for the most part, because there's probably better things you could grab. And if you already have, like, souls, you don't need to jump through those hoops. But obviously, dumping him immediately to the graveyard in a more roundabout way, if you absolutely have to, is totally fine. Or maybe, especially because, like, you know, we have things that we can, like, reborn and they trigger on, like, special summon, like Edia and such, then that's another, like, just, like, further way we can extend, potentially. The fact that this is, like, a just generic monster searcher for Monarch, even though your opponent gets to pick, anyone who's played Monarch knows, like, the pantheism restriction where your opponent chooses, most of the time it's not a choice. Like, there are a few instances where it can matter, but I would say 9 times out of 10, you're very happy with the result that your opponent gives you. So the fact that there's a pantheism for monsters specifically is fucking crazy. Like, that opens up so much with the deck. Not to mention you have 6 copies of it with tenacity. And then the second effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard, special summon a monster with 800 attack and 1000 defense from your hand. So that's also insane, because again, one of the biggest recurring things I keep saying throughout this entire video is one of the biggest issues with Monarchs is getting monsters on the field to tribute for the big Monarchs, right? And so this is yet another mechanism that you can get one of the Squires onto the field for free. It has to be in your hand. Funny enough, this card can get you one of those to your hand, so you can just add Tessera to your hand, which can already immediately special summon itself, so you don't even have to worry about it. But also, you can just special summon Edia, which still triggers on normal or special. So you can have, like, Tessera as a free special summon, and then, like, if something gets stopped, you can go banish Rebellion, special Edia, and then do the whole Edia line on top of it. That's just fucking crazy. Like, that's just legitimately just bypassing everything that's, like, the biggest issue with this archetype. And so not only do we have this, we've gone through, like, 3 cards that special summon themselves and, like, give you value in addition to that. This deck's insane. This deck is... The biggest issue with this deck is still going to be going second. Like, that's going to be a problem that has to get figured out. But board breaking isn't, like, the worst with this deck, because you have Stormforth built in and it's searchable. And Stormforth being able to not only just get you a big guy on the field, but take your opponent's monster. Not to mention you have so many ways to special summon. Maybe it's not as bad as we think. There are so many board breaking cards that exist now that didn't exist before. Maybe just your other non-engine is just board breakers, and you're just like, okay, whatever. I'm just going to, like, you know, tactics, lightning storm, like, whatever, and then the remainder you just clean up with your engine, because the engine is just so everyone knows Monarchs bricks. Like, that is like a notorious thing with this deck. You lose to this deck more because of the deck than your opponent. And so this is solving a lot of the core issues with the deck, which makes me really fucking excited to play it again. And last but not least, oh my god, the artwork on this card is fucking insane. It is Idos, the Monarch Idos, and all of the elements of the other Monarchs all just like coalescing together. This is like one of the coolest artworks I've ever seen. This is Culmination of the Monarchs. Very fitting. This is a continuous trap card, interestingly enough. And boy, if you love Subterror Final Battle, you're gonna fucking love this card. If your opponent special summons a monster and you control a tribute summon monster, you can banish one Monarch spell or trap from your graveyard, then activate one of these effects, but you can only use each effect of this card's name once per turn, meaning the following effects, you can only use one of them you can't use the same effect twice. Even though there's 6 of them, you can't double up. You have to use a different effect. Destroy one monster on the field, destroy up to 2 spell and traps on the field, discard one random card from your opponent's hand, destroy a set card, place one card on the field on the top of the deck, banish one card on the field. This is nuts. First of all, the flavor here is phenomenal. So first up, this is embodying all 6 of the Monarchs. Funny enough, in the artwork, there's 7 colors because there's Kuraz, but Kuraz's effect isn't on here. We apparently just ignore Kuraz and Delg and the other like fake Monarchs. But anyway, it's the original OG 6 Monarchs, right? Which is really fucking cool. This is good for several reasons. First of all, because it has the Monarch tag, it's searchable. And as you know, like searching a spell or trap in a Monarch deck is not hard. That is extremely easy to do. So setting this up on turn 1 and it's an actual disruption is probably going to make this a guaranteed staple of the deck moving forward, because most of the time your interaction is in the form of like Aether summon Kuraz, like pop your opponent's shit, which is like fine, but obviously Kuraz is like not great. And now this just like solves that problem entirely, because now Aether can also just get other things because you're not reliant on it. You can maybe still play the Kuraz, like that might still just be a play. You don't even need it, right? Because it's so easy to fill up the grave with spells and traps. You're already trying to do that with Prime Monarch anyway, because that's like one of your main recursive engines. That's like Monarch Treeborn Frog. So you're already playing it for that. And then in addition to that, if you didn't notice, it doesn't target. None of these effects target, which immediately makes them better than every single Monarch variant of this effect, aside from like, you know, the Thestalos one, because you're not targeting your opponent with Thestalos. Like Zaborg, Mobius, Ryza, Caius, those historically target in their text. This just straight up banishes a card on the field. Straight up, Ryza spins something to the top of the deck. Just pop a monster with Zaborg. Just, if they are playing back row, you Mobius them, or you Grandmarg them, right? That's fucking crazy. That's the fact that you can only use each effect of this card's name once per turn. You can use like 4 of these effects in a singular turn if you're... So imagine this, right? Your end board is just something simple. Domain, because we're going to assume for the purposes of this that you're playing the Domain variant. Domain, like, big guy, you have Aether in hand, and you have, like, Culmination set. Maybe you have a second Tribute Summon monster, too, because you want to make sure Culmination resolves. If your opponent... First of all, your opponent can't use the extra deck, so they're stuck using their main deck monsters to try to, like, play through Domain and big guys, right? So, good luck most of the time. So, they already are working against that. But then, as soon as they special summon something, because you have a Tribute Summon guy on the field, you immediately can just pop it, or banish it, or spin it. If you need to Aether it, like, you can Aether it. Like, there's so much shit you can do with this that I don't know how they packed 6 effects onto a singular card. It's crazy. It's so, like, I don't even know what to say about this. This is nuts. This is absolutely nuts. And this is like, I love that this is where like 2025 Yu-Gi-Oh! Is, that we can print. This is like the Monarch support of our dreams right here. Candidly, like, maybe there's a world that this boosts this deck up to like rogue viability, but maybe even tiered status, right? Locking your opponent out of the extra deck is a really fucking frustrating mechanic to deal with. There's also so many other... you have to think about this. Link summoning did not exist when Monarchs were tier 1. That is insane to think about, right? And so obviously people want to just default to the Domain way of playing this deck. There may be other things that you maybe want to, like, not play Domain, and you have so many options because you're able to special summon so many different things off of all of this new support. And then, like, you can banish, then the banishing triggers, like, what is it? You can banish it to trigger the scheme if you want, because that also just gives you more fodder. Because if you already, like, think about this, right? If you already had like tribute summon guys on the field, let's say you have Prime and Grave, like you bring Prime back, you use Culmination to use the effect to do something, you banish the Scheme, then Scheme triggers, which you can like target something they control. Say it's Dark, you add Caius or whatever, you summon Caius, and now you have another guy plus Prime to double tribute for like a Mega Monarch, and then that's like your Aether line right there. So you don't even have to waste the tribute summoned Aether for another Aether or whatever. You can just double tribute for Aether there. The lines are forming in my head as I'm talking about it. And it just makes me excited because this archetype, granted, I know this is not everyone's cup of tea. I think it's just like I'm being boomer here and just reveling in the nostalgia, but these cards are cracked. Like these cards are so fucking good. There's so many more pot cards for consistency now too that they didn't have before. The gears are turning. The gears are turning. They really know how to get me back in. They really know how to get me back in. But in any case, that does it for the new Monarch support reveal. I really hope you guys enjoyed just a discussion of it with my very limited knowledge of, you know, modern Yu-Gi-Oh! And kind of going based off my boomer days of playing this deck as religiously as I did. Because this deck's a lot of fun. This deck is a lot of fun. And it's cool that we're getting new support for a deck like this that is probably a fan favorite in terms of like archetypical support. Because it's one of the oldest, right? It's one of the first archetypes in Yu-Gi-Oh! Zaborg was printed in Ancient Sanctuary like right after Invasion of Chaos in 2003. So, 2004, excuse me. So it's cool to see. It's really cool to see. I really hope this deck is playable. I really, really hope this deck is playable because this deck's fucking awesome. This is really, really cool. So, guys, that's going to do it. Thank you all so much for watching. I know this is a bit weird from my, like, usual content as of late, but I don't know. I felt inspired to talk about it because I love talking about Monarch. So, thank you all so much for watching. If there's anything I missed, let me know down in the comments because I'm sure I missed, like, 5 million things that are probably applicable to, like, modern-day Yu-Gi-Oh! But that's what you all are for. You guys can brainstorm down in the comments. This is really cool. This is really cool. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next time. So guys, that's going to wrap it up for another video. I really hope you all enjoyed. Let's go ahead and shout the patrons for all their continued support. So shouts to Shout1317, Tim00x3, MBT Play Medolce, Moto, Cameron L. Smith, The Synchro Guy, Pony Stark, Dan the Man Hoban, Little Fadeleaf, Draconic, Brian Dancer of Class 7, Dylan Rare Hunter, JW11860, Flannel Daddy, literally all of the guinea pigs, Cheeks McLapperty, Stolfin Amethyst, MBT canceled by community soon, canceled by all committees soon, canceled by all players soon, Wonder Waffle, MBT and Nimnims 1, Boxer Brief, Fueled Knight of Passion, Daniel Howell, Electrician of the Ice Barrier, Arco, and the Nova 129. Thank you again so much for watching, and we will see you next time.